Namaskar. India has expressed concern over the violent situation in several parts of Nepal along the Indian border. India has asked Nepal to resolve differences through dialogue, free from violence, which would enable broad-based ownership and acceptance. Now, while Nepal has adopted a constitution, it has left ethnic groups of the Terai region upset. India's ambassador in Kathmandu has spoken to the Prime Minister of Nepal in this regard. The Foreign Secretary S. Jaishankar had recently visited Nepal, and he had said the promulgation of a new constitution should be an occasion of joy and not violence. During his two-day visit, he had called on Nepal's President Rambaran Yadav and Prime Minister Sushil Koirala. He also met Communist Party of Nepal, Unified Marxist-Leninist Chairman KP Sharma Oli, and United Communist Party of Nepal Maoist Chief Prachanda. He had also met a number of agitating leaders of the Terai region, including Mahanta Thakur, the chairman of the Terai Madesh Democratic Party, Upendra Yadav, the chairman of the Federal Socialist Party of Nepal, and Vijaya Gachadar, who is the chairman of the Madeshi People's Rights Forum Democratic. Well, to discuss the new constitution of Nepal and the aftermath of that, we have with us in the studio Jayant Prasad, former ambassador of India to Nepal and former distinguished member of the Indian Foreign Service, and Vijay Pratap, who is the convener of Dialogues on Asia, South Asia, and also an expert on Nepal affairs. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. We'll start with you, Ambassador Prasad. So, the Madeshi people, the Terai region people are concerned about this. What exactly do you think, understand by these concerns?
There is a high degree of alienation emanating from the fact that the Terai, where the Madhesis live,
yes,
is constituted by less than a quarter of Nepal's geographic area.
That's right.
Where the majority of Nepalis live, 51% of the population.
Because it's lowland.
It's lowland. And the Madhesis, those who speak Bhojpuri, Awadhi, Hindi, Maithili,
that's right,
Bengali, they constitute, taken together with the Tharus, which is a Janjati that lives in the Terai, and the Dalits, they constitute 34% of the population of the country.
Right.
But in the governance structures of Nepal, there is very poor representation of the Madhesi community. For instance, in the 75 districts of Nepal, there are only 2 district officers, not 25, who are from the Madhesi community. So this sense of being cut off from the polity of Nepal, that their aspiration was that this would be bridged by the federalism that would be instituted with in this new constitution. The plus in the new constitution is that it is a secular federal democratic republic.
Yes.
The minus is that political gerrymandering has been done in a way that of the 20 provinces in the Terai, only 8 of them have been given a statehood where the Madhesis have a clear majority. 3 states in the east, 2 states in the west have been left out, and the remaining 7 states have been merged with the adjacent hill states. So this is the first point of difference on demarcation. But there are 2 other important issues, and we could come to that later.
But Mr. Pratap, the constitution is flexible. There can be changes. This is what the 3 main parties are saying. You can come, let's have a talk, and it's flexible, and by 2/3 majority we can amend the constitution.
But it's negating all the old agreements which had been arrived at between different people, especially 2007. There was an agreement, 8-point agreement with the Madhesis, and all those promises have been totally forgotten. And this too in the name of some kind of pseudo-nationalism. All the political spectrums in Nepal, irrespective of their ideologies, have been actively seeking India's engagement. And this time they were not listening even to the most just and the agreements which they themselves had entered into with the Madhesi leaders. And India has a moral responsibility to speak up because it brokered those agreements
Sure.
on the instance of Nepali leadership itself.
Absolutely. And well, looking at it from India's point of view, this is a 1,751 kilometer border, and the regions that are having this problem are all on this border, and naturally it would affect us, and most of it of this border is in Bihar and going to an election. So currently also there is a concern, isn't it?
There is the aspect of political repercussions of the unsettled conditions in Nepal and what it could do to impact on the Bihar elections. But that is a contingent existential factor which operates for the short term.
For the short term.
I think in the long term, India's interest in Nepal is not related to Indian interests per se, but Nepalese interests, because if there is an unsettled situation in Nepal, it's bad for the Nepali people first and foremost, but also bad for India, because unlike any other relationship that we have in South Asia, the India-Nepal relationship is a people-centric relationship. Of the 28-29 million resident population of Nepal, 6 million of them at least live and work in India under conditions under which Indian nationals themselves live and work within the country. They are given national treatment.
That's right.
So, and in the Tarai area in particular, there is a lot of crossing of the border on both sides. There is huge social interaction. So if Nepal gets unsettled, it has not a good impact in the contiguous part of India. And if Nepal doesn't make progress, then it will tell on India's progress.
Mr. Pratap, let's try and understand this also from the point of view of the highlands versus the lowlands. Apparently, it's like the highlands call the shots. They are like the upper castes. They are the ruling class in a sense, isn't it? Is this and this seems to have come through in the constitution as well.
That's right. Nepalis themselves concede that all what Kathmandu elite wanted has been enshrined in the constitution. But unfortunately, civil society did not have Nepali civil society didn't have the courage to speak this truth consistently and openly. There were some articles, but there's so much of propaganda against Indian establishment, and it has been going on for 2-3 years, very opportunistically, using what does not suit their factional battles is portrayed as interference by India.
Sure, but Mr. Prasad, the Nepali Congress has been reasonably close to India, isn't it? Or all of the three major parties, let's say, I mean, all three of them are close to India?
All of them.
All are close to
India?
India?
Been close to India. All of them have close interaction with India's political elite.
Yes.
In fact, the two of the early prime ministers from the Nepali Congress, Krishna Prasad Bhattarai and BP Koirala, they were arrested by the British for participating in India's freedom struggle.
So there you are.
So the connectivity is extremely strong, and so did one of the former prime ministers, Manmohan Adhikari, of the Communist Party of Nepal, United Marxist-Leninist. He also.
The reason why I raise this question is because, I mean, some observations have come out that China is very happy with the constitution, and it's communist to a large extent. So so the communists have got their way in a way, have they, in this constitution?
No, I wouldn't say that. It's a misreading of the situation. I don't think the Chinese would also want unsettled conditions in Nepal, which is in the underbelly of Tibet, which is one of their two troubled provinces, the other being Xinjiang. So I don't think it suits China to have Nepal in a phase where there could be civil strife and disaffection, because it will also impact on Chinese security. So this reading might be incorrect. In fact, there might be greater consonance between Chinese and Indian interests in the long-term stability of Nepal. In fact, this aspect of India's interfering attitude in Nepal that Vijay Pratap ji referred to, that is espoused by certain elements in the Nepali elite, it is completely and totally misplaced, because my own feeling is, looking at the evolution of Nepalese democracy, that in the long period of Panchayat Raj, which is partyless democracy and absolute monarchy between 1960 and 1990, The democratic forces in Nepal were looking for India's active assistance.
Okay.
But India has assisted Nepal only when Indians have responded to the voice of the Nepali people.
Okay.
Whether it was in 1951 when
Sure.
the Rana oligarchy ended, whether it was in 1959, 1990 when there was the first people's movement, and again when India brokered the peace process
Yes.
in November 2005 with the 12-point agreement in Delhi. It was in response to an appeal by the 7 democratic parties of Nepal and the Maoist party. India didn't jump into the fray by itself.
Sure.
So India has been a reticent player in Nepali politics, and it has only intervened in a constructive manner.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Mr. Vijay Pratap, proportional representation is what the Madhesis are asking for, and the Tharos. But this has provided for 110 seats of 275, which is proportional representation. Not enough?
It's half the population getting only 65 seats for Madhes region, and rest of the population getting 135 seats.
So it was earlier in the constitution.
They have been partly disenfranchised by giving geographical entity as the basis for the constituency delimitation.
Okay, let's try and understand that, because earlier what was it and why has it been brought down, if we have to understand it? It was apparently 58%, brought down to 45%. So that's quite a significant drop.
It's not just proportional. The hitch is that you are making geographical basis.
You're changing the boundaries.
For the
Yes.
For delimitation. That is how you disenfranchise.
Yes.
Mr. Prasad has written on it extensively in public domain.
Tell us, Ambassador
Well, there
Prasad.
are 3 issues, a little bit complex for a television audience.
Yeah,
but
if you can make it simple for us.
Yeah, I'll try to reduce it to 3 simple points.
Sure.
One is the reduction in the number of seats which are going to be determined on the basis of PR, proportional representation.
Yes.
So the first past the poll post system is going to be 165 seats.
Okay.
There, what Vijay Pratap ji was explaining was that of the 165 seats, given the fact that the Tarai has 51% of the population, it should normally have 83 seats. It has, as of the initial allocation, 65 seats.
Okay.
So that is incorrect, because the 2007 interim constitution very clearly said that population would be the criteria for delimitation of constituencies.
Okay.
So this becomes very unfair for any inhabitant in the Tarai, particularly the Madhesis who are in a majority there.
Okay.
So this is the first problem. The second problem is that the PR seats being reduced from 58% to below 50%, which you referred to, what it does is it reduces the representation of Dalits, of the Janajatis, of the Madhesis, and of women in parliament. This is the second grouse. And there is a third one, and very simply explained, in our Rajya Sabha, the upper house, there is also a proportionality to population and the size of the assemblies.
Yes.
But in Nepal, the 7 provinces which have been carved out under the federal scheme, they are following the American model. So out of the 7 states, there is only one Madhesi state.
Okay.
So if you have a number of seats allocated on the basis of equality, then the Madhesis, who are very overly populated in their area, get a very limited number of seats in the upper house.
But Mr. Pratap, can't people move from one place to another? I'm just asking you from a devil's advocate point of view, because also, you know, regions which are large in geographical area may not have so much population, need to be developed as well. So they need money, you know, you need infrastructure. So they will. I mean, I'm not talking about population-wise. It's obvious that I mean, the benefits have to flow to people, and people are a democracy. But in terms of development, the whole of Nepal has to be taken into consideration, and you know, you can't have the Terai region deciding the future of what's happening in the highlands.
No, it's not Tarai region deciding. It is people of Nepal deciding.
So that's right, but
And
they are living in the Tarai region.
You disenfranchise part of them because they live in Tarai region.
I'm just giving an argument.
Yeah.
Yes.
No,
it doesn't work that
no,
way?
because they have been historically discriminated, and they fought against that discrimination. Tarai people fought against that discrimination, and this has been a long struggle. They fought against monarchy, and they were in the forefront for struggle for democracy, and all this resulted in a 7-point agreement in 2007, where all this was provided for, and now they are negating all that.
So, I mean, this is a thing that has been debated for ages now. It's taken 8-9 long years of looking at this constitution, and finally, you know, people are happy that we've got a constitution. Majority of the people in Nepal are happy, except for those who belong to the ethnic groups. So, in the end, would one say that, you know, this is a positive development?
You know, the constitution being promulgated is an important milestone in Nepal's march towards democracy.
Right.
But let's remember that a constitution which is promulgated under the shadow of violence,
Yes.
in which all the constituent assembly members don't have concurrence and don't sign on the document, it is very different from the Bangladeshi constitution of 72 or the Pakistani constitution of 73, or let's see the earliest constitution in South Asia and the latest. The earliest was the Indian constitution, where every member of the constituent assembly signed the constitution. Look at the latest. In 2008, you had the Bhutanese constitution. Every member of the assembly, including the then king, signed the constitution. So
here we had 507 signing and voting in favor, actually, 25 voting against and 66 abstaining.
So Mr. Modi, our Prime Minister,
Yes.
said when he last visited Nepal during the course of the SAARC summit, he was asked about this question, and he said that the constitution should ideally be adopted by consensus. He was kind of alerting the system that using majoritarianism to push through a constitution will not make it a lasting one. By the way, this is the 7th constitution that Nepal has since 1948. It had a 1948 Rana constitution. It had an interim constitution of 1951 after King Tribhuvan came. It had another constitution in 59, which resulted in the first experiment of democracy. And because it was so successful, that experiment, that immediately the Prime Minister was locked up as an Indian agent, and the parliamentary system abolished, and panchayati rule, which is party-less democracy, introduced. Then there was a constitution of 1990 and the interim constitution of 2007. So what I'm driving at is that in India we've had one constitution during this period. It's not an example. Every country has to work its own system. But for this to be a lasting solution as the foundational document of the new republic, they must take everyone on board, and there is still time to do it, because they should bring a massive First Amendment and accommodate the 3 principal problems that are there.
So you advocate that well, the amendment route is the way to change the constitution now, rather than, you know, go back and trying to adopt a new constitution altogether.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What would you say, Mr. Pratap? You know, some of the other issues that are of concern or that have been written about in the public domain are women are also concerned that, you know, their rights are not fully guaranteed. There seems to be a very patriarchal kind of a system, and it's being pushed to the forefront once again. I mean, if you're starting a new constitution now here in the 21st century at this time, at least give women their rights.
That is why reducing this proportional thing, where Dalits, women, minorities, they will get less representation. But I feel there needs to be a kind of political will, and Madhesis have to put their house in order and conduct their struggle non-violently, even while the excesses are committed from the establishment, which are, and sometimes the statements from the establishment are very provocative. And Madhesi leadership has to behave in a statesman-like fashion and conduct its movement in a non-violent fashion.
So that's important. You brought in the point of violence. Mr. Prasad, you know, I mean, in the run-up in the recent past, we've seen about 40 people have been killed, and the violence is continuing. And of course, it is a matter of concern. First, I mean, there is one part of Nepal which is supposedly happy and celebrating, and, you know, another part which is burning. So, not the ideal circumstances, as you yourself said earlier, for a constitution to come into being.
Absolutely. That's the message that our foreign secretary had when he had gone to Kathmandu.
Yes.
And so yesterday you saw the spectacle, and Reuters reported on it, that as the constitution was being signed by the president, Dr. Rambaran Yadav, there was a crowd of 2,000 joyous Nepalis outside the CA building celebrating.
Yes.
But just hours before that, there was a crowd of 20,000 in Birganj defying the curfew, and to disperse which the police opened fire, killing one person on the spot and grievously wounding 2 or 3 others.
Okay.
So you cannot have this kind of situation, and this is unprecedented. Nowhere in a democratic country has the promulgation of a constitution been greeted by a complete lockdown in a significant part of the country.
Right. And well, I mean, Nepal speaks about what, 100 languages besides Nepali, right? And is there a feeling that, you know, I mean, there is some sort of there is a chance, I mean, what's actually the constitution is trying to do is push through majoritarianism, push these groupings out of existence over a period of time, or something like that?
I don't think language will not be that big an issue. It's the political representation in the power structure of the society. The way,
but it is the Nepalese speaking people who are controlling the shots, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
But that will be taken care by the vote Raj logic eventually.
Okay.
That doesn't matter. What matters is that, as Mr. Prasad pointed out,
when you talk about a secular democracy,
yes,
it has to take into consideration all groupings, ethnic groupings.
There will be provinces
yes.
where the local languages, Avdhi and Bhojpuri and Maithili and Magar speaking, all this can.
And it also talks about, you know, safeguarding the ancient cultures. And these are obviously also ancient cultures, if one would look at it, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
How would you view the, you know, the presentation of the constitution in terms of its objectives, in terms of, let's say, the preamble kind of things, Mr. Ambassador Prasad? You know, federalism, secularism, socialism, all these things.
In those respects, it's not different from any other democratic and progressive constitution. What it has done is it has taken out vital elements of agreement from the interim constitution and vital elements of the agreement in the first constituent assembly. And what is puzzling is that in both of these, the 3 dominant parties that have called the shots this time, the Nepali Congress, the CPN-UML, and the UCPN Maoists, all 3 were the ones who had agreed on the interim constitution. Okay. So for them to take out these 2 articles which spoke about delimitation on the basis of population.
So what was their provocation? What did this?
No,
Why
because
did they
they saw an opportunity to take away something that they had conceded earlier. So they took it away.
Okay.
And all that is being asked for now, and all that can be done to restore confidence and normalcy, would be to just restitute these 2 articles. The other one that we have not spoken about far is the representation of these marginalized and deprived and disadvantaged groups in the higher organs of the state. There was a very clear reference to it, and how they have subverted this article is by that dealt with these 4 categories that I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
The Janajatis, the Dalits, the Madhesis, and women. And they have now
this
piled
would be
it
through a process of reservation or through a process
through
of
a process of informal reservation. For instance, in the Election Commission, Supreme Court, in the Commission on Human Rights, and other bodies where there is a possibility of the cabinet nominating people to come on these bodies. There must have been, I mean, the idea was that the whole of the Nepali society must be represented in these organs of the state.
Sure.
To take out this article or to dilute it by adding even Khas Aryans as a category would dilute the salience of the protection offered to these 4 disadvantaged groups earlier.
Okay.
So in sum, I want to suggest that the Nepali constitution, because your question is a very good one, the Nepali constitution looks good on the face of it. And it encapsulates many of the achievements of the peace process and the people's movements. What is remaining to be done is, by comparison, something very small. Because Nepal has made such fundamental progress in the last 10 years. Compared to what has been accomplished, what remains to be accomplished is only a small part of it. And if they do that, then the whole peace process and the people's movements' aspirations will find fulfillment.
Mr. Pratap, after our foreign secretary visited there, actually these 3 parties did have a press conference, and they appealed to both these groups to come forward for dialogue, and they said that the constitution is flexible, and there's room for dialogue, and I mean, it can be done. So they are open to this dialogue. You think that the process that should be taken forward, or do you feel that that these groupings should actually have an interlocutor?
Some interlocutor, I won't know, that those parties have to decide. But there seems to be empty rhetoric saying that yes, come for a dialogue. There should be, there have been, I have been repeating, there have been concrete agreements, and they have gone back on them. So they should come out very concretely what they are going to offer in the dialogues. Without any assurance, without any concrete stepping forward, this dialogue will become pointless. It's a ritual which they want to undertake.
So, Ambassador Prasad, Nepal as it is sandwiched between the 2 Asian giants. Is there a role, I mean, or just because of its geography, that it has to take on board the concerns of both these countries, isn't it, of India and China?
I would say that Nepal has a huge opportunity which is missing. It's missing out on. Nepal has natural endowment which is unparalleled in South Asia, and yet its per capita GDP is inching towards half of the South Asian average. So it must take advantage of its closeness geographically with both India and China, which still remain the 2 largest expanding markets in the world. And it is not going to be able to do that unless there is stability in Nepal. So the question that has to be asked by the Nepali leadership is, does this constitution provide for that kind of stability? And if it doesn't, what can be done to remedy it? Because the remedy is quite easy. And as Vijay Pratap ji very nicely said, by offering talks without putting something on the table, that will not take the process forward. They should just accept the 3 major demands, which are seem to be very reasonable on the part of those who feel disenfranchised. And then Nepal will look forward to a day of much greater prosperity.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us here on this special program. Well, how effective Nepal's new constitution would be depends on how the 3 main parties, which are the Nepali Congress and the communists, Marxists, Leninists and Maoists, deal with the concerns of the Tharu and Madheshi people. And they say that the constitution is flexible. And as far as these amendments are concerned, the new constitution says a 2/3 majority can amend any issue except that of sovereignty. Well, the constitution is based on principles of federalism, socialism, secularism and inclusiveness. And Nepal, as we were talking earlier, is sandwiched between the 2 Asian giants, India and China, and by geography would have to take their concerns into consideration as well. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.